Buenos días, mi nombre es Débora Ruiz y yo les voy a hablar sobre el sistema endocrino animal. Como definición tenemos que es el estudio sobre el funcionamiento de las glándulas que secretan las hormonas cuyos efectos inciden en la integración y desarrollo del organismo ante las etapas de crecimiento, el inicio y mantenimiento de las actividades reproductivas, metabólicas y respuestas conductuales ante las variaciones del medio interno y externo.
Hormones in animals. In our earlier topic, we have learned how nervous system is involved in control and coordination in the beings. Apart from the nervous system, the other systems in our body is also involved in control and coordination, which is endocrine system. As we learned earlier, just like plant hormones which involves in growth of the plants, animal hormones do not bring about directional growth but promotes controlled growth in various areas to maintain the body structure. The chemicals that are secreted in animals which are involved in control and coordination are called as hormones. The hormones are secreted by endocrine glands. The collection of different endocrine glands constitutes as endocrine system. The hormones that are secreted from endocrine glands are released directly into blood and targets on specific organ to regulate the body. Endocrine glands are ductless glands. They doesn't have duct. There are 8 endocrine glands in human body. They are 1. Pineal gland, 2. Pituitary gland, 3. Thyroid and parathyroid gland, 4. Thymus, 5. Pancreas, 6. Adrenal gland, 7. Testis, 8. Ovaries. Endocrine gland. Hypothalamus. Location, forebrain. Hormone. Functions. Main center and relay station of endocrine system. Pineal gland. Location, forebrain. Hormone, luteinizing and follicle stimulating hormone, oxytocin and other hormones. Functions, brings ovulation and maintains corpus luteum. Oxytocin in uterine contraction and releasing breast milk. Pituitary gland. Location, forebrain. Hormone, growth hormone. Functions, regulates growth and development of body. If sufficient growth hormone is not secreted by pituitary gland in childhood, body growth will be affected. This condition is called dwarfism. If it is secreted in large amount, the growth of bones and limbs will be more. Such a person looks as a giant. This condition is called gigantism. Thyroid and parathyroid gland. Location, windpipe trachea. Hormone, thyroxine hormone. Functions, controls carbohydrate, protein and fat metabolism. Iodine is necessary to secrete thyroxine. If iodine is deficient in our diet, thyroid gland increases in size and swollen neck. Thymus, location, on trachea nearer to heart. Hormone, thymosin. Functions, activates immune system. Pancreas, location, below stomach. Hormone, insulin. Functions, regulates blood sugar levels. Adrenal gland, location, above kidney. Hormone, adrenaline. Functions, prepares the body to deal with emergency situations. Testis, location, male sex organ. Hormone, testosterone. Functions, causes development of sexual organs and secondary sexual characteristics in males. Ovaries, location, female sex organ. Hormone, estrogen. Functions, causes development of sexual organs and secondary sexual characteristics in females. Now let us learn how the hormones work in our body. For example, we have learned adrenaline hormone acts in preparing to deal with emergency situations. Now, let us find in detail how it prepares in such situation. In case of emergency situations, adrenal glands release adrenaline into blood, which acts on heart and other tissues, increase heartbeat, sends more oxygen to muscles, reduces blood supply to digestive system and skin, diverts blood to skeletal muscles, increase in breathing rate. Hormones not only act in emergency situations but also involve in coordination. Any deficiency of hormones or excessive release of hormones leads to disorders in the human body. Example, insulin deficiency leads to diabetes. Thyroid deficiency leads to hypothyroidism. Excess thyroid leads to hyperthyroidism or goiter. So, it is very important for hormones to secrete in precise quantities.
The human body is constantly perceiving and responding to stimuli, both from the outside world and from within our bodies. The nervous system works with the endocrine system as hormones provide feedback to the brain, and the brain influences hormone production in response to both external and internal stimuli. Both these organ systems are the communication links of the body and help the body's life systems function correctly in relation to each other. Let's take a more detailed look at each of these organ systems, starting with the endocrine system. The endocrine system is comprised of glands which secrete hormones into the bloodstream. The hormones then travel within the bloodstream to their target tissue, where they can exert their effect. There are 9 major endocrine glands. The hypothalamus is a structure in the brain that acts as the main control center of the endocrine system. It links the nervous and endocrine systems, responding to nerve signals from other parts of the brain, as well as to several different hormones. The hypothalamus produces hormones that regulate the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is located near the bottom of the brain and is often called the master gland because its hormones control several other endocrine glands. It consists of 2 lobes, each producing different hormones. One such hormone is growth hormone, which aids in the development and growth. The pineal gland is a small endocrine gland located in the brain that plays a role in the production of melatonin, a hormone that aids in the regulation of sleep patterns. The thyroid gland is an endocrine gland located in the front of the neck that produces thyroid hormones that help regulate metabolic processes, heat production, and the development and function of other organ systems. A parathyroid gland is one of 4 small endocrine glands located near or within the thyroid gland that release hormones to help maintain calcium and phosphorus levels in the body, which are important for bone development. An adrenal gland is one of 2 endocrine glands located on the top of each kidney, consisting of the medulla and the cortex. These glands release hormones that help regulate critical functions in the body, such as blood pressure. The inner portion, called the adrenal medulla, releases hormones such as epinephrine that increase heart rate and increase blood flow to the muscles. The adrenal cortex, found on the outer portion of the gland, helps control blood sugar levels, responds to stressful stimuli, and helps the kidneys regulate blood pressure. The pancreas is found near the stomach and small intestine. In addition to secreting digestive enzymes, it also releases hormones to help maintain healthy glucose levels in the body. If blood sugar levels are too high, the pancreas secretes insulin. If blood sugar levels are too low, the pancreas causes the release of stored glucagon.
Como aplicación en la medicina, su estudio es importante ya que permite entender cómo se regula el metabolismo y el crecimiento de los animales cómo influye este sistema en la salud de los animales y que en este caso de alteración o mal funcionamiento puede alterar la salud y el desarrollo del mismo. En relación a los pros y contras, como pro tenemos que el sistema endocrino juega un papel fundamental en la integración del desarrollo del organismo ante las etapas del crecimiento, inicio y mantenimiento de las actividades reproductivas y metabólicas y respuestas conductuales y entre las variaciones del sistema interno y externo. El sistema endocrino también, junto con el sistema nervioso, intervienen en las respuestas de adaptación de los animales y en los cambios del medio ambiente. Con relación a los contras, si los niveles hormonales están elevados o disminuidos, es posible que el paciente tenga un trastorno hormonal. Más comunes podríamos mencionar la diabetes, el hipotiroidismo en perros, el hipertiroidismo en gatos y el hiperadrenocorticismo.
Okay, let's name the endocrine glands, and I could also say endocrine tissues, and then let's put their relative locations in a drawing of a dog that I have borrowed. And I'm going to enlarge this, and although we have a dog on the screen, this would also apply to cats and horses, our other two main companion animals that we discuss, and it could also apply to most mammals that we deal with. Okay, so let's start in the most cranial aspect here in our drawing, and I want to talk about the pineal gland. Now this is just a drawing, but the pineal gland is within the brain and it's actually on the very midline of the brain. So this is a relatively okay location in terms of this drawing, but it's actually, very deep within the brain, on the midline of the brain actually. Next, we have the pituitary gland, which is spelled out here, and it's at the base of the brain, and this drawing, of course, doesn't do it justice because it doesn't show the brain, but it shows the relative location. So the pituitary gland, you should know, is of two parts. For the animals that we talk about, we can talk about the anterior pituitary gland and the posterior pituitary gland. So that's two different glands excuse me, that we talk about. Now, if you look at the drawing, I'm going to put some blue right above the pituitary gland. And this is in the brain, of course, but it's a structure that's also labeled here. I'm going to bring the label in, called the hypothalamus. And we should know that the hypothalamus sits right above the pituitary gland, and it often controls what the pituitary gland is releasing. Of course, remember, these are all endocrine glands / tissues, right? Okay, so then, moving more caudally, we can talk about the thyroid gland, which I'm pointing to here, the term at least, and then the gland is here in the neck. It's actually attached to the trachea. And then we have the parathyroid gland here, and this drawing shows some space between the two. That's usually not the case. They would be kind of together in the same structure, but you can identify the thyroid gland separate from the parathyroid gland. And look at that name, para, meaning beside. So the parathyroid gland is beside the thyroid. Now, I'm going to move in my crude little drawing of the heart, because the heart makes a hormone, and we can understand that. Next, I'm going to draw in a relatively crude drawing of the diaphragm, which is the main inspiratory muscle, but it separates the more cranial cavity known as the thoracic cavity, which the heart resides in, and then behind or caudal to the diaphragm, we have the abdominal cavity. And so I want to move to the abdominal cavity and name the stomach. And I'm going to enlarge the stomach here. Now, this drawing There's the stomach. It's got a portion of it. It's not quite right. It would be more forward in the animal than that, but this is a borrowed drawing, so I'll just label it stomach. Then, and of course, this is an endocrine tissue. Then we have the liver, which I'm going to portray as a block of blue here and label it. And the liver is endocrine tissue. Of course, you realize most of these tissues have multiple functions. Okay? Okay, now I do want to point out that the stomach ends, and then we have, I'm making this loop a little bigger here. You can see I'm working down here. There's always a loop of small intestine that connects to the stomach, and as the ingested food leaves the stomach, goes into this first loop of the intestine, and that's where this pancreas is located. The pancreas is always located in the first loop of the small intestine near the stomach. So we also should know that the small intestine that I did draw is also a releaser of hormones. So let me tilt that up and draw that like that. The small intestine, endocrine tissue. Now I'm going to move to the adrenal gland, which is spelled out here. And of course, there's a misspelling. I shouldn't say of course, but when you borrow something, they didn't spell check. So G-L-A-N-D, adrenal gland. And that's here, cranial to this structure. But that's the adrenal gland, and we should know it has two parts. The adrenal cortex, and we'll be naming these later, spelling them out in another lesson, but the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla, that's the two parts. But then, that structure, right behind it, is the kidney. And lo and behold, of course, we're not seeing the other side of the animal, but the kidney, there are two kidneys, of course. Kidney is endocrine tissue. Then, I want to point out the ovaries. These two structures here, or black dots in this case, are the ovaries. And you can see the spelling further away. Okay, those are endocrine organs. Then, at the end of the ovaries, or connected to the ovaries, is the uterus. So let me move over the label for that, because lo and behold, the uterus in some animals makes hormones. Okay? And then one more tissue that isn't always here. I guess I got two more tissues. One, the placenta, which I want to name, because if the animal is pregnant, the placenta makes hormones. And this drawing, finally this drawing actually has the sex organs of both sexes, because it's easier to do it that way in a drawing. And so the testes are here. You know, they're in a scrotum outside of the abdominal cavity, hopefully. They need to be held at a lower temperature than body temperature. But the testes are an endocrine tissue. That ends this lesson.
Sobre el problema aplicado en Ecuador, tenemos el resultado de 229 casos de hipercolesterolemia sometidos a estudios y pertenecientes al grupo 2. Se ha observado que el 45% de los casos están asociados a las enfermedades endocrinas e infecciosas. Y por último, como conclusión, tenemos que el sistema endocrino de los animales está formado por células endocrinas funcionalmente caracterizadas por la secreción de hormonas. Estas células se encuentran junto a las glándulas, que son formadas por la glándula y están extraídas, o también se las van a encontrar dentro de los tejidos. Algunas neuronas también secretan hormonas llamadas células neurosecretoras, y su estudio es muy importante dada la gran importancia que tiene para los seres vivos, especialmente los animales. Muchas gracias.